Has the real Mount Sinai finally been discovered? Today, we're investigating one of the most important locations in the entire Bible, and honestly, one of the most controversial mysteries in biblical archaeology. Mount Sinai. This is the mountain where Moses met God in a burning bush, where he received the Ten Commandments, where God descended in fire and smoke while the whole mountain shook. For 1,600 years, millions of pilgrims have traveled to a mountain in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, believing they were standing on holy ground where Moses encountered God. But in 2024, new evidence emerged that's forcing scholars to reconsider everything, because the real Mount Sinai might actually be in a completely different country, behind closed borders in Saudi Arabia, in a place most people have never even heard of. And the physical evidence at this alternative site? It's honestly stunning. Burnt mountaintops, split rocks, ancient altars, things that match the biblical description in ways the traditional site never has. Before we dive in, if you enjoy deep investigations into biblical history and archaeology, please subscribe to Should I Go? It really helps us continue bringing you these explorations. Now let's journey into the desert to search for the real Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is arguably the most important mountain in the entire Bible. This is where Moses encountered God in a burning bush, where he returned with 2 million Israelites fleeing Egypt, where the mountain itself burned with fire, shook with earthquakes, and was covered in supernatural cloud and smoke while God descended upon it. This is where Moses received the Ten Commandments, where the covenant between God and Israel was forged, where the foundation of Western moral law was established. Pretty significant location, right? Here's the problem. The Bible never actually tells us where it is. It describes the events in vivid detail. It gives us the journey from Egypt through the wilderness to this mountain, but it doesn't drop a pin on a map. The ancient readers apparently knew where Midian was. They knew which mountain in the wilderness was called the Mountain of God. 3,000 years later, that knowledge is lost. And now we have multiple theories, multiple mountains, multiple countries claiming to host the actual site where God gave Moses the law. The answer is way more complicated and way more interesting than what you learned in Sunday school. If you ask most people where Mount Sinai is, they'll point you to the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. Specifically, a mountain called Jebel Musa, Mountain of Moses in Arabic. It's been the official Mount Sinai for about 16 centuries. The tradition goes back to the 4th century AD. Queen Helena, the Roman Emperor Constantine's mother, traveled through the Holy Land identifying biblical sites. She determined that Mount Sinai was here in the southern Sinai Peninsula. A couple centuries later, Emperor Justinian built St. Catherine's Monastery at the base of this mountain, cementing its status as the Mount Sinai. And listen, this place has serious history. St. Catherine's is one of the oldest continuously operating monasteries in the world. It houses ancient biblical manuscripts. It has what they claim is the actual burning bush, still alive, still growing at the base of the mountain. Millions of pilgrims have climbed this peak over the centuries. It's sacred. It's venerated. It's been Mount Sinai for longer than most countries have existed. So, case closed, right? Not quite. Because here's the thing. Despite 1,600 years of this being the mountain, there's virtually no archaeological evidence supporting it. Think about what the Bible describes. 2 million Israelites camped around this mountain for nearly a year. A massive encampment. Thousands of cooking fires. Pottery. Tools. Waste. The remnants of daily life. Archaeologists have searched extensively and found almost nothing. No pottery shards from the right time period, no campsite remains, no inscriptions, nothing that definitively says the Israelites were here. And then there are the geographical problems. The Bible says Moses fled from Egypt to Midian, which most scholars place in northwestern Arabia, modern-day Saudi Arabia. While tending sheep for his father-in-law in Midian, he saw the burning bush on Horeb, the mountain of God. Jebel Musa is over 200 miles from Midian. That's a long way for an 80-year-old shepherd to lead a flock of sheep. It doesn't make practical sense. After receiving the law, the Israelites traveled from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea near the border of Canaan. The Bible says this journey should take 11 days. From Jebel Musa to Kadesh Barnea, about 160 miles through rough desert terrain. Could they do it in 11 days? Maybe. But it's tight. Look, I'm not saying the traditional site is wrong. Centuries of tradition mean something. The spiritual significance of the place is undeniable. But the lack of hard evidence and these geographical puzzles, they've led a lot of researchers to ask, are we looking in the wrong place? This is where things get interesting. In northwestern Saudi Arabia, near the border with Jordan, there's a mountain called Jebel al-Lawz. Until recently, almost nobody outside of Saudi Arabia knew about it. It's been off-limits to foreigners for decades. Closed military zone, no access, no photography allowed. But a handful of adventurous researchers managed to get there in the 1980s and 90s. What they found was shocking. Let me walk you through the evidence. The charred summit. First, the top of Jebel al-Lawz is black. Not just dark rock, we're talking scorched as if exposed to intense heat. The rest of the mountain is typical tan and reddish granite. But the peak looks burned. Now remember what the Bible says about Mount Sinai. The Lord descended upon it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. Geological surveys confirm this blackening isn't natural weathering. It's not volcanic rock. There's no volcanic activity in this region. Something heated the top of this mountain to extreme temperatures. The split rock. About 10 miles from Jebel al-Lawz, there's a massive boulder, about 60 feet tall, that split completely down the middle. The Bible describes Moses striking a rock in this region and water gushing out to supply the Israelites. This rock shows clear evidence of water erosion at its base, in the middle of the desert, where there's no water source. Geologists have confirmed the erosion patterns are consistent with sustained water flow, not rain runoff, actual flowing water coming from the rock. Could be coincidence, but it's a pretty specific coincidence. The altar and pillars. At the base of Jebel al-Lawz, researchers found stone structures that match biblical descriptions. The Bible says Moses built an altar at the base of Mount Sinai and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. At Jebel al-Lawz, there's a large stone structure that appears to be an ancient altar. Nearby are 12 standing stones arranged in a line. Now these could be from any ancient culture. The region was inhabited by various peoples. But the match to the biblical description is striking. The golden calf connection. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Bible says that while Moses was on the mountain, the Israelites got impatient and built a golden calf idol to worship. At Jebel al-Lawz, researchers found petroglyphs, rock carvings depicting bulls and cows. Some show people appearing to worship these bovine figures. Egyptian cows? In Arabian rock art? That's unusual. The Egyptians did worship bovine deities. The Israelites, fresh out of Egypt, would have been familiar with this imagery. Again, could be from a different culture, different time period. But it lines up. The boundary stones. The Bible describes God telling Moses to set boundary markers around Mount Sinai, beyond which the people couldn't pass, or they would die. Around Jebel al-Lawz, there's a perimeter of what appear to be ancient boundary markers, stones placed at regular intervals encircling the base of the mountain. Some of these stones show evidence of being worked, deliberately shaped and placed. There's one more piece to this puzzle that's often overlooked. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul mentions Mount Sinai, and he says something very interesting. Galatians chapter 4, verse 25 says, "Now Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia." Paul specifically says Mount Sinai is in Arabia. Now, defenders of the traditional site argue that Arabia in ancient times could have included the Sinai Peninsula, that the boundaries were, kind of fuzzy. True enough, ancient terminology was often loose. But if Paul meant the Sinai Peninsula, why didn't he just say in Sinai? Why specify Arabia? The most straightforward reading is that he's distinguishing the location. Mount Sinai is not just in wilderness, it's specifically in Arabia. Jebel al-Lawz? Definitely in Arabia. Always has been. No ambiguity. It's not proof. But it's consistent with the Arabian location theory. Now, before you think this is settled, let me tell you, most mainstream archaeologists are not convinced by the Jebel al-Lawz theory. And they have some fair points. The charred peak, the blackened top could be explained by geological processes, metamorphic rock, mineral deposits, natural weathering patterns that create dark coloration. Without detailed chemical analysis of what caused the blackening, and Saudi Arabia hasn't allowed that kind of invasive testing, we can't be certain it was fire. The split rock. Rocks split naturally all the time due to earthquakes, thermal expansion, erosion. The water erosion at the base could be from an ancient water table that's since dried up. The stone structures. The altar and pillars could be from any number of ancient cultures. Midianites had religious sites. Nabateans built structures throughout this region. Bedouins have used stone markers for centuries. Without datable artifacts, pottery, inscriptions, organic material for carbon dating, we can't prove these structures are from the time of Moses. The bull petroglyphs. Rock art is notoriously difficult to date. These carvings could be from 1500 BC or 500 BC or later. Various cultures in the region had bull imagery in their religions. Connecting them specifically to the golden calf incident is speculative. The skeptics say, interesting site. Suggestive correlations. But nothing proves this is Mount Sinai. And you know what? They're right to demand proof. Archaeology requires evidence. Carbon dating, stratified artifacts, inscriptions. Something concrete that ties a site to a specific event and time period. Jebel al-Lawz has circumstantial evidence. It has geographical advantages. It has intriguing features that match the biblical narrative, but it doesn't have the smoking gun. There's a practical reason this theory has been controversial for so long. For decades, Jebel al-Lawz was completely off limits. Saudi Arabia kept the region closed. Military zone, no foreigners allowed. The few Westerners who tried to visit in the 1980s and 90s were arrested. Equipment was confiscated. Some spent time in Saudi jails. Why the secrecy? Hard to say. Maybe they didn't want treasure hunters destroying archaeological sites. Maybe it was just standard military zone protocols that had nothing to do with Mount Sinai. But here's what's changed. In recent years, Saudi Arabia has been opening up to tourism. Vision 2030, their modernization program, includes making historical and biblical sites accessible. Jebel al-Lawz is now officially recognized by Saudi authorities as a candidate for Mount Sinai. They've started allowing limited archaeological survey work. Some tour groups with proper permits can now visit. We might finally get the scientific investigation this site needs to settle the question. You might be thinking, why does it matter which mountain it is? The story is what's important. That's a fair point. The spiritual significance of the Ten Commandments doesn't depend on finding the exact mountain. But here's why it matters to a lot of people. Historical credibility. For believers, finding concrete evidence of biblical events strengthens faith. It moves the narrative from religious story to historical event that actually happened. If we can point to the actual mountain, touch the actual altar, see the actual evidence of God's presence, that's powerful. Academic resistance. For decades, mainstream archaeology has been skeptical of the Exodus story. Many scholars doubt it happened at all, or suggest it's been heavily mythologized. Finding real evidence would force a reassessment. It would validate the biblical account against academic skepticism. Understanding the journey. Knowing where Mount Sinai really is helps us understand the Exodus route. Where did they cross the Red Sea? What path did they take? How long did different legs of the journey take? Getting the geography right illuminates the whole story. And frankly, there's something exciting about mystery, about exploration, about the possibility that something world-changing has been hiding in plain sight for 3,000 years. Here's where things stand in 2024. The traditional site at Jebel Musa still has the weight of history and the infrastructure of pilgrimage. It's sacred to millions. That doesn't change. But Jebel al-Lawz has momentum. More researchers are taking it seriously. Saudi Arabia is allowing more access. Technology for remote sensing and analysis is improving, and there are other candidates too. Jebel Sin Bishar in northern Sinai, Har Karkam in the Negev. Each has advocates and evidence. The truth is, we don't have definitive proof for any of these sites yet. What we have is Jebel Musa, Centuries of tradition, but no archaeological evidence. Jebel al-Lawz, strong geographical fit and circumstantial evidence, but no hard proof. Other sites, various strengths and weaknesses. The investigation continues. And honestly, that's part of what makes this fascinating. We're living in real time as this mystery potentially gets solved. New technology, new access, new analysis. The next decade could bring the answer. So where is the real Mount Sinai? I can't tell you with absolute certainty. Nobody can. Not yet. What I can tell you is that Jebel al-Lawz presents the most compelling physical evidence that's been discovered so far. The burnt peak, the split rock, the altar, the geographical fit with Midian. These are things that match the biblical account in ways the traditional site never has. But whether it's the traditional site in Egypt, or the challenger in Saudi Arabia, or somewhere else entirely, the importance isn't really in the rocks. It's in what happened there. A group of escaped slaves met their God, received laws that would shape Western civilization, made a covenant that would endure for millennia. That story changed the world. The exact GPS coordinates don't change the impact of that event. But for those of us who love biblical archaeology, who want to stand where history happened, who believe that faith and evidence can work together, this is one of the great unsolved puzzles of our time, and we might be close to solving it. The next few years could bring definitive answers. Saudi Arabia is opening access. New technologies are being applied. More researchers are taking the evidence seriously. Thank you for watching this investigation into the real Mount Sinai. If you enjoyed this deep dive into biblical archaeology, please subscribe to my channel Should I Go. We'll be following this story as new evidence emerges, and I guarantee there will be more discoveries coming. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Are you convinced by Jebel al-Lawz? Do you believe the traditional site is correct? Or do you think Mount Sinai is somewhere else entirely? I genuinely want to hear your perspective. And if you know someone who would find this investigation fascinating, please share this video with them. Until next time, this is Should I Go? And remember, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop searching for truth. The greatest discoveries are the ones we've been overlooking for centuries. Safe travels, and hopefully, I will see you in the next video.